Hello and welcome to National Public Radio's Popular Culture in Précis. Frivolous news for the postmodern sophisticate. It is February 4th, 2030, and I am your host, Sapphire Crimson Smythe. Today's sponsor is the Steve Jobs app, your number one source for digital turtlenecks. Enter the code PRÉCIS at checkout for 15% off your next purchase. That's P-R-E with le accent aigu. C-I-S. For all those who did not waste their Sunday glorifying barbarism, yesterday was the National Football League's Super Bowl LXIV, which I don't think I need to tell you, is 64. This marked the 10th victory for New England Patriots coach William, begin air quotes, Bill, end air quotes, Belichick. The accomplished sportsman celebrated by browsing chambers at the Fairfax Cryobank just outside Boston. According to a source inside the Belichick household, Bill is determined to coach every Patriots Super Bowl until the earth is consumed by the fiery supernova of the star that has nurtured our species for millennia. In other news, last week Adam Sandler released his 33rd feature film in which he locks tongues with a woman at least thrice his attractiveness, causing this reporter to say, well, at least he's Jewish. Coming up after the break, Professor Brinkley Tomato shares his groundbreaking research on medieval shoveling technique. I'll give you a hint. They didn't lift with their legs. This has been Popular Culture in Précis. Please, stay tuned.
This joyous but somewhat pretentious broadcast played on the radio while Tom proposed to his wife, Alsace. A photograph of Belichick after his Denari Super Bowl victory still hung above the O'Halloran's bed 25 years later. It bade them good night, greeted them in the morn, and watched as they clumsily coupled every day after brunch. The cantankerous couple only made it doggy style, facing the head of the bed, so both could stare into the coach's arrogant eyes as they summited Mount Orgasm and the dam holding back the river of sexual release burst, sending a cascading flow of fluids flying into, onto, or sometimes through the other's body. Every day for a quarter century they prayed as they thrusted, slapped, and hollered. Prayed for happiness, prayed for re-emergence, prayed for a Super Bowl.
They beat the Jets and became contenders, and we cheered them on. Then they beat those Miami pretenders, and the jinx was gone. Still on the dollars around them, said, can we go that far? Just let us stay for the record. There's no stopping this rising star. New England, the Patriots and me. New England, the Patriots and me. Rolling on to victory.
Chill Bill by Pat Walsh.
Now it's the Bears, the big wind from Chicago. The Super Bowl awaits. They may be monsters out on the midway, but they've got a different date. All of the gamblers that tell us the Super Bowl can't be won, but the Bears are gonna get buried.
said Alsace, the regular clacks pausing for her vulgar outburst. Clamp your goddamn trap, said Tom. He would brook no interruptions to the penultimate game of the season. The game they hadn't been to for 15 years. The game which heralded the second coming. The Pats received the kickoff at the end of the fourth, down 6. Classic 2-minute drill. Gromby Warpweft, their quarterback, drew back and let loose a deep bomb. A perfect spiral, the pass fell into the basket of tinfoil Butterfingers Goggins. Unfortunately, his moniker proved all too accurate, and the ball crashed to the turf. The AR stream went to commercial, and hamburger-loving models suddenly appeared in their living room.
Get that meat between my buns, baby. Ah.
Oh, yeah.
Tom glanced over at his wife. 9 toenails lay in a neat stack on the coffee table, ready to be catalogued with yesterday's batch. The 10th dangled from a pinky toe, coated in blood. The grass-green carpet became, drip by drip, a crimson tapestry strewn across the apartment floor. He sighed, exasperated. Do you have to do that now? Well, you wouldn't let me during the pregame. Because it blows the juju or the poppycock. The models disappeared. An autotune cyborg with comedic aspirations took their place and began to extol the virtues of tasty cake pastry insurance.
I have calculated. Tasty cake pastry insurance is a sweet deal. Ha, ha, ha. Beep.
Tasty cake, no it don't make Twinkies you can't.
But Juju retired 30 years ago. You know what I meant, Tom fired back as he retrieved the first aid kit. Jesus H. Christ, you don't need to trim every day. Fortnightly, max! It's easier to cut through if you keep up with it, said Alsace. Throwing her curly raven locks over her shoulder, she turned her formidable gaze on her husband. But that's why you always over-trim and cut. You know what? Never mind that. Even after 25 years of marriage, the catalog gives me the hibbity-jibbities. She shook her head. Why the hell did I marry this chump? She thought. Riddle me this. How would I compare them if I didn't scrapbook them? Tom popped open a bottle of Chilean Chardonnay and took a long swig. Maybe if you spent a little less time clipping and cataloging and more time pleasing me sexually, we would have had a baby years ago. Oh, like your slow swimmers had nothing to do with it. They're not slow, they're deliberate. Both crossed their arms and huffed. Then they snapped back into their virtual seats at the 50-yard line. Warp-Weft jogged onto the field.
Omaha, Omaha. I like to dress up as a corgi and cuddle with my golden retriever. Set, hike.
He handed the ball off to the running back, and Bartleby Chapsmeyer took off down the field. A six-sport athlete in high school, Bartleby ruled everything from the soccer pitch to the bingo card, and his dominance persisted into the NFL. He burst into the end zone after an ankle-shattering juke. His 40-tooth smile cut his face in twain, and he let out a celebratory rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody. Mama! Ooh, 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 which would have made Freddie Mercury blush had he not died more than 80 years earlier. Thankfully, a North Korean defector exposed the AIDS conspiracy in the 2030s, and America nuked both the country and the virus off the map. Shout out to Parkman's son, said Bartleby, dedicating his performance to the AIDS-pulverizing Asian hero. Tom and Alsace jumped from their chairs, marital disputes and bloodied toenails forgotten. They screamed, shouted, and eventually mated. The Patriots were going to the Super Bowl. "2,000 miles away, a cosmetically overweight man stirred in his titanium coffin, ruffling the frayed gray sleeves of his mutilated frock. He reached back as the lukewarm water streamed over his taut, tattooed frame. He grasped the bar and brought it towards him. He scrubbed everywhere. Face, neck, back of the neck. He tightened his grip for a more vigorous scrub downtown. The soap started to slip. It popped into the air, off his chest, right palm, left palm, calf. Smack! It hit the tile, the predatory glare of every man in the group shower honing in on his vulnerability. "No, not in there!" screamed Crimean as he jerked awake. The cell's concrete walls provided little comfort, but the warmth behind him gave him some relief from the horrors of dream and memory.
"Don't worry, baby,"
crooned his cellmate, AJ, stroking Crimean back into a fitful slumber with the help of a Haitian lullaby. The men closed in. White, black, Asian, Blasian, subcontinental, pygmy, all joined in the humiliation. For them it was a game, for him, torture. Their appendages straightened toward him as it began. Fats Cello took a swig of the toilet wine he'd keisted a week before, drew back, and struck. "Dirty! So dirty!" Crimean woke, for good this time, and kissed his right bicep for good luck. The scowling tattoo seemed to repel affection, yet Crimean met its steely gaze with labial tenderness. He reached under his pillow and slipped the shiv into his waistband. When he slid off the bunk, he found AJ organizing his philatelic collection with the help of his pet frog, Rathbone Davis. AJ, determined to make everything just so, stopped only to fix Crimean's collar and wipe the floor of Rathbone Davis's breakfast. The striped jumpsuit flattered Crimean, widening his wiry frame. He stared through the barred window into the chilly depths of the American River. Across it lay Folsom and freedom. With a harsh shout, "Implants! Out!" the warden turned on their implants, and a clock appeared in the upper left-hand corner of his vision. 13 days, 17 hours. He could make it. "Meow, caw," chirped a robotic voice. He swiped away several pages of spam before the morning paper appeared, a translucent hologram stark against the concrete walls. The Sacramento Bee, established before they went extinct. Tearing past several articles on artificial pollination and cabbagetricity, Crimean found the sports page. "Yes!" he exulted. "Yes, yes, yes, yes!" His voice reverberated throughout the prison. His joyous shouts sung through the iron bars and poured stone windows. The Patriots won the AFC Championship, and he'd be out in time for the parade. He dropped a copy of the page in his memory bank and checked his Zuckerbook. He maintained the page for one purpose only: masturbation.
"I'm Mitch McConnell, and I approve this message."
That'll do it. Crimean followed his high school girlfriend's account with near fibrous regularity. A new post in front of the old Winnebago, dinged up, moldy, and scratched all to hell. He left his ride and his heart with Lorraine, and she gave both to his best friend not even a week into his incarceration. Her caption flashed below the image. He promptly swooned. Nude inmates pointed and laughed as Fats's leg swung forward, sending the soap careening off the turquoise checkered baseboard and into a stall. Crimean opened the door. The tile floor sunk on a consistent 20-degree angle. A portly lady of the lake, the toilet lay suspended by its plumbing above a pool of effluvium. He waded in, determined to rescue this month's only bar. So this was rock bottom. His tears fell in sheets, but only the apocryphal Cried River could wash away his shame. Bending at the waist, Crimean wilfully exposed his posterior gulch to the crowd, but there were no takers. He came to slowly this time, the sordid scene still splayed across his eyes. He ran his hands through his long black hair, which Anal Johnny had brushed during his spell. Crimean met his cellmate's eyes.
I need out. Now!
Put that thing down and come help me.
All right, fine!
Alsace sighed and motioned with her hand. Her Zuckerbug took one last photo. The metallic mosquito buzzed into the house. She turned back to the Winnebago. Tom loaded the last sack of potatoes into the storage bay and closed it up. She ran her finger along the red and orange stripe which bifurcated the dirty, cream exterior. The only piece of luggage remaining was a bag of Utz sourdough specials, America's preferred pretzel.
Utz, I did it again.
She lifted it daintily with 2 fingers and entered the coach. Its chassis creaked under her weight, but the old girl still ran as great as the day she received it. Alsace dropped the bag onto the pink-enameled countertop and began snacking. She remembered that day clearly. 20, no family, no job, only a boyfriend in prison and his best friend, an up-and-coming lion tamer with a stable job, good prospects, and a raging hard-on dying to get in her vag. So she took the Winnebago, did some soul-searching, and proposed to him a week later. She could still remember Crimean's face when he got the wedding evite. Heartbroken, lost, bruised. She hadn't the heart to FaceTime him ever again. Now, Crimean, the only person who loved Bill more than she or her husband, would miss the second coming. Tom entered, still wearing the diamond ring she'd given him so long ago. He smiled. Sorry about my outburst before. I just can't wait to get pegged by Bill Belichick. I really hope the unthawing process makes him as horny as we expected. Alsace smiled back.
It's okay, hon. We're both a little jittery.
Let's hit the road, shall we? Said Tom. With that he twisted the key in the ignition. After several screechy attempts, the octogenarian engine roared to life, and the Winnebago putted away from home and on toward adventure. Warden Farley Hempsfield von Coldplay paced through his prison when he got in every morning and went home every eve. With his grey cap, walrus moustache, and ramrod straight spine, he channeled the spirit of his hero, Otto von Bismarck, with every step. He took Folsom State Prison beyond the horrendous song which ran its name through the gutter and turned it into one of the most respected penal institutions in the nation. The envy of wardens across the land, it was harder for an inmate to get into Folsom than an Asian into Harvard. He'd never had an escape because no one wanted to leave. His mess halls were top-notch, his guards disciplined, and his re-education system world-renowned. The warden's black leather riding crop made a series of satisfying smacks as he dragged it along the bars. He reached the end of cell block D and clapped his heels together. Impliance off! He allowed a twinkle of contentment to appear in his eyes. He nodded to the guard manning the gates, much more alert than the dullards indoors, stopped to scratch his neck, then stepped into his vintage Volkswagen Beetle. Lime lightning sped down the Californian Autobahn as he sang along to a 1903 recording of Das Deutschlandlied. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der... His bellows ceased. The Beetle veered off the road. A lanky fellow dragged Warden Farley Hempsfield von Coldplay out of the vehicle. The VW galumphed over a small hill and back onto the desolate street. The warden snored softly in the middle of a field. Without stirring, he spoke. Schleifen, gut, keine croissants. France finally conquered, if only in his dreams. Gotta know when to hold 'em. Tom pointed to Alsace. She sang the chorus. When to hold 'em. Know when to fold 'em. When to fold 'em. Know when to walk away. They leaned their heads together and harmonized. And know when to run. In this fashion, the pair made their jolly way across northern California, the deserts of Nevada, the standing rocks of Utah, the phallic pines of Colorado all flew by in a montage of song, dance, and roadhead. The evening redness reflected off the Rockies' snowy peaks. They ascended the mountain. Dusk faded into twilight, and still they plowed on. A pair of circular headlights emerged from the night. Tom lay sleeping on the divan, unbothered by the brown, threadbare upholstery. The headlights grew nearer. Alsace clutched the wheel. Little River Band blared from the speakers. She always had LRB loaded up. Nearer still. She caught sight of them, slowed down, waved the little thing past. The other car accelerated. It drew even with the Winnebago. She locked eyes with the driver. Gasp! The Beetle swerved to the right. It punched into the Winnebago. Both vehicles plunged off the mountain road and somersaulted half a mile into the valley below. Crimean waved to the puffed-up warden. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a neon tube. The makeshift dart shot from the feathered end of the hollowed-out toothbrush. Crimean held his breath. Impact! Farley Hempsfield rubbed his neck but came up empty. Crimean sighed. His last projectile achieved its goal. He watched the bug turn the corner, then tucked the uniform around the unconscious guard's body. He leapt from the booth. His feet rested on free ground for the first time in 25 years. The high grass and weeds tickled his legs, still clad in prison-issue thin, striped pantaloons. The license plate pump's ozone scent no longer filled his nostrils. Freedom smelled like pollen and bird shite. The green season turned the plain surrounding the prison into an emerald sea. He ran for a mile. The wind lifted his straight dark hair off his shoulders. It trailed behind him like so many black tentacles on a particularly racially insensitive jellyfish. An embankment separated the field from the road, and beneath its auspices sat Lime Lightning, a little scuffed but no worse for wear. Crimean smiled for the first time in 2 decades, sans erection. 2 minutes later, the VW chugged through a nearby neighborhood, and Crimean waved to the children playing ball in the day's dying light. He felt an urge to ditch the Nazi mobile, ditch the escape, and ditch his self-assigned mission. He wanted to play too, but the world needed him. More importantly, Bill needed him. Coach's face smirked up at Crimean from his bicep, silently pleading for help. He accelerated up the ramp and onto I-80, where he'd cruise for 3,000 miles. He set the cruise control and reached into the glove box. Just as he expected, his hand came back grasping the familiar tin container of Sigmund's cocaine. This is your mama's coke. Luckily, von Bismarck took up the habit in his later years on the recommendation of his friend Freud. The warden frequently took pulls from the snuff box while on rounds. Crimean drove through the night and into morning. Cocaine had a silly way of exposing the natural world. Crimean saw the scaly testicles of roadkill lizards in the desert. Never a student of anatomy, Crimean could now pick out the testes amid the splattered red innards of the reptilian beast from 20 yards. His eyes picked out the tiny beans, or bean paste, depending on the degree of impact, like a hawk rapaciously stalking a field mouse through knee-high grasses. He passed through more temperate biomes and caught glimpses of wild does and their furry clitori as they pranced along the road. The wrinkles of erectile tissue above the venison vaginas were the closest thing to human minge he'd glimpsed in quite a while. His elevation rose. He drove through the mountains and, everywhere he looked, owls 69'd mid-flight. Their wings flapped, their beaks undulated, and their shrieks of delight echoed amongst the pines. He began to ascend a mountain. The orally active avians disappeared, and coincidentally, so did his cocaine. His eyes fluttered, his foot rested heavily on the pedal, but he stayed awake. A lumbering camper appeared ahead of him. It slowed, and he accelerated. He pulled alongside the RV. It was a Winnebago. The eyes which stared down at him were a dark mahogany. Entranced, he inched closer and closer. The face which held them contained the same shock he'd last seen at his trial. He stopped struggling. Clearly, this was already a dream. After more than a day of uninterrupted motoring, Crimean rested. The Beetle swerved to the right. It punched into the Winnebago. Both vehicles plunged off the mountain road and somersaulted half a mile into the valley below. "Carmichael, Crimean War the 7th, said the male nurse. His dark African hands massaged the infected fluid from Crimean's pained genitalia. "You are one sick boy. Tell me, how does a handsome boy such as yourself avoid the clap for 20 years?
How does an Oxford-educated Ethiopian such as yourself end up in Folsom Prison?"
The nurse smiled. An errant beam of sunshine caught his ivory teeth. The man's bonhomie illuminated the room.
"That is a story for another day, friend. What would you like on the television? It is time for the resting."
"Please, could I call my girlfriend? She needs to know."
"Which cell is he? Oh, you have been here only for a week. I am not supposed to do this, but I will lend you my cellular mobile."
He glanced around.
"You must be quick."
Crimean dialed her number and waited. Her face appeared on the screen mid-groan.
"Baby, are you okay? Do you?"
Crimean trailed off. Her naked body writhed on camera.
"Sorry, Crimean, but I'm marrying your best friend, Tom. We are banging right now. The wedding is on the 15th.
A brightly colored Evite popped up in his messages. "Hey, pal!" Tom waved over her shoulder. Crimean hung up. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and not just from the ache in his loins. His heartache burned with 1,000 times the intensity of a syphilitic schlong. Their sickness was his only consolation. Tom awoke to the unsuppressed scent of sweat and saltpeter. He sat up and surveyed his surroundings. A ring of snow-capped mountains studded the firmament. Outside the valley he saw nothing but blue sky peeking through the peaks. The burnt orange of dawn refracted into the valley, though the sun had not yet risen above the crags. He found himself without clothes in the Rockies, yet, he looked down, no shrinkage. His package retained the inflation endemic to warmer climes. In fact, his penis was twice its usual size. He belched in shock. His balls, distended past the knee since his disastrous 13th birthday party, now bounced happily in a taut sack, slapping midway down his shaft. The grass under Tom's exposed buttocks almost glowed green. The roses were aggressively red, pure white. The turtles waddled about in perfectly circular shells. Ancient trees seemed to stretch miles into the sky. 5 women and 3 men approached. Tom noted the enormous racks with appreciation. The males' penises displayed a perfection of form he'd only ever associated with the hoodie himself. 6 of the figures wore well-polished Kalashnikovs over their shoulders. The others wore worried expressions. Tom barely recognized his wife or estranged pal. Their perfectly muscled frames and cocoa butter smooth skin belied their middle age. In their youths, before all this body-positive business, neither could have been models, but now they would not look out of place as step-siblings on a mainstream porn site. "Hello, Tom," said a woman with a blonde muff straight out of a 70s swingers retreat. "Welcome to the Shangri-La of the Rockies. It's like the Shangri-La in Asia, but in the Rockies. We're the nudist NRA. It's like the NRA, but with an extra N and less clothes." "All right," said Tom. "The NRA stands for National Rifle Association. That's why we have guns. They were invented in China, which is in Asia, which is where Shangri-La is. Have you ever seen the Scooby-Doo movie in Shangri-La? Or perhaps Doctor Strange, the Marvel franchise which features camouflage, inspired by the legend of Shangri-La, the Asian rejuvenative paradise in Asia? What about—" No, I understand." Tom nodded placatingly. "Well, fuck you too, asshole." Tom hopped to his feet, suddenly spry and sprightly. His dukes rose. "I've never hit a broad before, but you could be my first, sweet cheeks." A man with a silky, white-blonde beard and Scandinavian braid hovering above shoulders wider than an adolescent ox approached. "We do not tolerate such sexism in the Shangri-La of the Rockies, you cunt." Tom, an aardvark encountering an apex predator, think polar bear or bloodthirsty walrus, took a few steps back. The Norseman towered over him. The tip of Tom's nose brushed the cleft between his perfectly proportioned breasts, equidistant from his bronzed nipples. His brilliant beard parted. "We were going to invite you and your companions to join us in our immortal utopia, and give you a +1 of any person you chose, including the artificially preserved. But now you'll be lucky to make it out alive." Alsace gave him a disappointed shake of the head. Crimean dove for his neck. Alsace and Crimean awoke together, her body flung atop his by the vagaries of physics and automobile design. The smoking hulk of the Winnebago lay topsy-turvy several yards away. The beetle was nowhere to be found. She looked into his eyes and spelunked the depths of his soul. A crash broke up the tender moment. They scrambled to their feet and backed away from the Winnebago. Another clank came from inside. The side door burst open and a body tumbled out. The limbs strewn out at unnatural angles. The neck twisted thrice round, and the torso mottled with bruises and blood.
My God, Tom!
Alsace rushed to his side. Miraculously, his chest rose and fell. Oxygen continued to pump through his comatose veins. The Norseman strode out of the wreckage. His companions followed. Their Kalashnikovs shone in the midday sun and rattled slightly as they clambered up the Winnebago and stood on the exposed underbelly. A small glint emanated from the doorway. Alsace leapt from Tom's body, stumbling over it in her haste.
My catalog!
The binder was in a pitiful state indeed. Its cover caved in, the plastic bags torn apart like a lion surrounded by tuna. Finger and toenails littered the Winnebago's ceiling. She hugged it to her chest and ran into Crimean's consoling embrace. A polite cough garnered their attention. The Norseman's gargantuan member trembled in tune with his elocution.
We know you must be troubled and confused, but we have a little something prepared for you.
Alsace, teary-eyed, looked up from her shattered nails. The nude figures took their guns off the shoulder straps and held them by the muzzle, with the heel resting on the Winnebago's metal chassis. The Norseman snapped. A flurry of near untrackable motion began. The guns spun and tapped the surface with an indefinably transfixing rhythm, punctuated by frequent and emphatic snapping. They cartwheeled, backflipped, and vaulted across the Winnebago. The Norseman strutted toward Alsace and Crimean, snapping all the while. Then he rapped.
We had the nudist and array, not some pussies like NWK. Straight out of Shangri-La, but we in the Rockies, lot of fucking dumb. You want to heal, this is the right place, but you might find my language, I might craze. Bitch. My gun is a Kalashnikov. I fuck my Aunt Silly with Masakov. Clothes are for bitches, snitches, and other freaky crutches. Ted Danson's ass is the main fucking feature. Danson is a silver GD Fox. I'd like to get his dick in a box. Our backstory might seem impossible, unbelievable, but this dick is even more inconceivable. Listen close, use your motherfucking ears, or you won't come jacking it to motherfucking cheers.
The mesmerizing dance continued behind him, but the Norseman simply swayed. Tears began to fall from his eyes as well, but his were tears of joy, the tears of a man at one with his art. Abruptly, he started jumping and gesticulating. His voice deepened, and the song began again.
A few years back, we was motherfucking hunting. Added my mother to the motherfucking cunt band. No ties to the outside world. Then this guy's done tail unfurled. We drove off the cliff, much like yourselves. Woke up magical as Santa's elves. What was once ugly turned into beauty. Only downside, we can't watch Judge Judy. Now we're down here, stone cold chillin'. In this valley ain't nobody be illin'. After 1 year you can join us, initiated. All your lusts and desires will be sated. Until then, it's straight up masturbation. Good thing you ain't a flippin' crustacean. We're the nudist motherfucking NRA, and we fanatical about ice hockey! Wicca word! What?
The nudist NRA ended in a high squat, arms crossed, lips slightly pursed. Alsace and Crimean stared.
Could you repeat that, please?
She said,
And maybe a little bit slower.
added Crimean. One of the nudists pulled out a pamphlet and proffered it to them. This proved much clearer than the rap. The NNRA played a Monopoly game in their bus all the way from Albuquerque. It came down to the Norseman and blonde muff. The Norseman began to drive at the base of the mountain. He dictated his moves and assumed they were carried out in a satisfactory manner. The bus broke down at high altitude. He stood to diagnose the problem and glanced back at the board. 2 hotels on Park Place. He ordered 3.
Those traitors!
They claimed it fell off when the bus ground to a halt, but he knew. His eyes filled with rage. He sat down. The others crowded round, begging, pleading, to no avail. He shifted the bus into neutral. They accelerated backward, tottered on the edge, and fell. They'd been in the valley ever since, except for one excursion in which they discovered that 1 year in the Shangri-La of the Rockies equates rather conveniently to exactly 1 day outside. Alsace and Crimean left the wreckage behind. Over the next 364 days, they discarded their clothes, bonded with the NNRA, lost the pamphlet, and mutually masturbated.
It's so mutual.
Then, Tom woke up. Alsace wrenched Crimean's well-sculpted frame off Tom's comely torso. The 3 of them collapsed to the ground, panting. The Norseman and his commandos encircled them. A woman with bright orange hair ran off and returned a minute later. She threw 3 bundles at their feet.
You are no longer NNRA novitiates,
she said in a Scottish brogue.
Put on the restricting rags and one of you grab a turtle.
Alsace, Crimean, and Tom donned the outfits, shaking out a year's dust. Alsace let one of the small, circular turtles perch on her shoulder. The NNRA led them silently up a winding trail on the valley's outskirts. They climbed for hours. The late afternoon sun beamed down, but the temperature continued to drop. Their new bodies tolerated the exertion with aplomb. The cold hardened their picturesque pecs but left them otherwise unperturbed. Snow began to crunch neath their feet. From the crags emerged a frozen pond. At each end stood a net. The Norsemen reached behind a scraggly bush, and a shiny pile materialized. The NNRA laced up their open-toed ice skates and instructed the others to do the same. They took Alsace's turtle and bandied it about the pond with their Kalashnikovs. The Norsemen sprinted from the opposite edge and came to a grinding halt, spraying them with ice.
The rules are simple, he said. First to 3 goals. You win, you leave unscathed. We win, you leave very, very scathed. Also, you may want to review these.
He threw a small worn packet at their feet. The 2032 NHL Rulebook. They broke off regulation-length sticks from the brush and stepped onto the ice. Everything went poorly. Alsace, a childhood figure skating prodigy, could keep up with the NNRA on the ice, but possessed little hand-eye coordination. Tom and Crimean toppled repeatedly to the ice. Their new muscles proved no match for the nudist's numbers and decades of experience. The Norsemen won the first face-off without difficulty, deked around Crimean and batted Tom out of the way. A blistering slap shot sent the turtle rocketing into the net. Another face-off. The 6 nudists toyed with them. The turtle bounced from Kalashnikov to Kalashnikov for what seemed hours before finally scoring. Blonde Muff won the third face-off and shot immediately. The turtle rocketed through Alsace's legs, ricocheted off Crimean's shoulder, and skimmed Tom's left testicle on its way into the net. The Norseman smiled.
It's all over now. In our utopia, sexism is punishable by death, when in conjunction with an ice hockey loss.
He put his thumbs in his ears, splayed his fingers, and stuck out his tongue. The rest followed suit. They approached their vanquished opponents without humility.
Hosers!
Their warm, rank breath drifted up the group's nostrils. The Shangri-La of the Rockies' healing powers did not prevent halitosis. Finished with their taunting, the NNRA exercised their God-given Second Amendment right to bear arms, and 12 bare arms leveled the Kalashnikovs at the losers' chests. The turtle, forgotten in the corner of the net, crawled out. It spied some promising fronds across the pond. Rotational velocity takes a real toll on the amphibian appetite. Alsace, Tom, and Crimean made eye contact. That is, they stood in a triangular formation, and each went cross-eyed, looking diagonally into a different person's peeper with each of their own. Their minds melted. WWBD. What would Belichick do? The answer was obvious. Whatever was necessary. You don't become the goat without stepping on a few toes. Alsace lifted up her skate and brought the blade down on the Norseman's foot. 3 toes popped off, and the pinky, still mostly attached, sprayed unpredictably, filling the air with blood. The shavings on the pond's surface resembled nothing more than cherry water ice. He stumbled backwards. The unfortunate turtle shuffled into his path, and the blade landed square atop its shell. It spun back into the net. And waited a moment before beginning its determined march toward the fronds. The Norseman fared rather less well. He crashed to the ice with a shrill shriek. An admirable feat of acrobatics, he managed to land on his front, catching himself with his hands. He pushed himself up, then screamed again. The nudists, for all their freedom and breathability, had no protection against the elements. They ignored the moral, somehow neglected by Aesop, of A Christmas Story. Never touch your tender bits to frozen surfaces. The Norseman fell. His enormous penis, controlled by neither pants nor thong, dangled. He caught himself too late. The foreskin stretched as he pushed up and relaxed on the way down, but his predicament proliferated when he laid flat on the ice. His nipples touched down and refused to lift off. In other words, he was fucked. Their leader's fall caught the NNRA by surprise. Tom and Crimean took advantage, grabbing a Kalashnikov barrel in each hand and putting them off balance. 4 more toppled to the ice, trapped by their own disavowal of societal norms. Alsace pirouetted into a kick. A skate cut through Blonde Muff's neck like an ophthalmological surgeon's laser through a cornea. Blood leaked from the wound. And soon her corpse joined her comrades on the ice. They shuffled off the pond. After a brief respite, they set out for New England. The valley spread out beneath them as they continued up the winding trail. Its marvelous junglescape twinkled in the fading sunlight. Each looked back only once at the Shangri-La of the Rockies. Though only a day had passed outside, their year and its healing embrace left an indelible mark on their souls. They met the highway on its meandering path down the mountain's eastern face. Snow poured from the heavens in an unrelenting blizzard. For miles they trekked along the road, their thumbs permanently and painfully pointing to the other shoulder, as if making some sly, slanderous accusation on its honor. A white van pulled over. The driver was a mustachioed Chinese man. He took pity on the weary travelers. They clambered over the crates of exotic teas and spices and mated in a furious 4-minute-long three-piece, then fell unconscious. He shook his head at the Westerner's curious ways and continued on his way without a second thought for the passengers. His radio spluttered out the opening bars of Kung Fu Fighting. He glanced this way and that, as if his wife could hear the
racist Orientalist bullshit
all the way from Manitoba. He shook off his paranoia and cracked his neck. A time to get my funk on.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up. They were chopping them down.
End of line. Get out!
Crimean bolted upright, his hands instinctively covering his mouth and bottom. Tom and Alsace spoke less abruptly. With surprising strength, the Chinese man grabbed their ankles and pulled them from his vehicle. They fell to the ground with little ceremony. Crimean egressed of his own accord and stretched. Red lanterns zigzagged above the narrow alleyway. Intricate characters in gold paint twinkled on their facades. Other Asians strolled through the thoroughfare, bartering for fish or gumballs at the various stalls. Tom did not appreciate the foreign milieu. Did the muttonhead ship us off to China? I swear I'll bloody his nostrils. Crimean nodded.
That's one thing we can agree on. Turn on your AR implants, assholes.
Alsace said.
We're in Chinatown. Philadelphia.
She turned to the Chinese man and gave him a kiss on the cheek.
Thank you very much.
Outraged by the non-consensual smooch, the old Chinese man vowed revenge. As the Westerners walked away, he put in a call to some old mates of his. The American fuckers had no idea what was coming to them. At the Randy Chinaman Inn and Low-Quality Retirement Home, 3 elderly patrons hobbled up the fire escape and absconded across cabbage-covered rooftops. Crimean yawned and slipped an arm across Alsace's shoulders. Tom's face burned. Get your fucking hands off my girl.
Your girl? I had her first. Plus, we spent a year together in the Shangri-La of the Rockies while you were comatose.
Crimean put air quotes around comatose for emphasis.
I was actually comatose, you pork-riddled cretin.
Alsace grabbed both of them by the scrot.
I belong to no man.
Both rolled their eyes.
Mamby-pamby feminist bullshit. Jinx.
Double jinx. The Crimson Chin. Bill Belichick's tripartite penis. Corpulent armadillo soldering up. An air conditioning unit fell from the sky. It shaved Crimean's cargo pants and ripped his pocket from Tom's polo. It exploded upon impact with the concrete. Alsace stood behind the 2 men, shielded from the shrapnel. Crimean and Tom were in shock, but she remained unfazed.
I belong to a god. The god. Bill mother-flipping Belichick. And you better get used to it.
Alrighty then, they said, again in unison. This time, they forewent the jinx. Up above, 3 stooped figures made their slow but deliberate way to the building's edge. Alsace continued walking. Tom followed. Crimean grabbed their wrists, holding them back.
Syphilis! Syphilis! Syphilis!
Concerned browsers stopped milling about the street. Alsace waved them off, embarrassed. It took a while to realize something more alarming than syphilis was on its way. 3 elderly gents rappelled down the 4-story building. When they reached the ground, they detached from the clear ropes and plugged their catheters back into the half-filled sacks at their waists. They withdrew cans of tuna from the pockets of their bathrobes and opened them, scooping out the creamy contents. They took aim and fired. Tom, Alsace, and Crimean got a forehead full of preserved mackerel.
You have been marked by the fishy boys. Time to die.
The old men hobbled toward them. Tom moved to meet them. No one hit his wife in the head with canned tuna and lived to tell the tale. 3 feet away, a cane flashed out. Unfortunately, the old man could not lift it higher than his waist. Tom avoided it easily. He reached out and crushed the man's windpipe with one hand.
No!
Shouted one of his companions. The other looked down with a forlorn expression.
First you force opium on our country. Then you abuse us on your railroads. And now our friend is dead. Prepare to die!
Alsace circled around her old man. She went Widdershins first, then Decile, confusing him to all get out. She pulled the plug on the extension cord leading to his pacemaker. He dropped dead. The 3rd old man stood resolutely in front of Crimean and burst into flames. The Chinese driver ducked back behind the corner of the alleyway. Drat! The assholes were going to rape him and get away with it. Oh well, he shrugged and went back to his deliveries. They left the fish boys' corpses and walked on. Their AR implants broadcasted a GPS route onto the streets. A putrid odor invaded their nostrils.
Ray bloody purchase.
Memorial cabbage plant appeared to their right. Its massive smokestacks belched cabbages. The leafy green balls peppered the surrounding roofs. The streets, covered 15 feet above by massive plexiglass gutters, resounded with a constant but inconsistent pounding. The gutters fed enormous cabbage burners, turning the mediocre vegetable into that most valuable commodity, electricity. Cabbage collectors scoured the rooftops. They filled great burlap sacks and threw them to compatriots waiting below. Most roof cabbages ended up in the Constitution Center gift shop, between the mock Constitutions and Ben Franklin bobbleheads. "Isn't cabbage power incredible?" said Tom. "Can you believe only 30 years ago we didn't know about the tremendous amount of nuclear energy stored in their cores?" Alsace nodded. As an undergrad, she worked as a research assistant to Dr. Francium Greenbrier, Midwestern Kentucky's foremost expert on cabbage science.
Thank Belichick that Michael J. Fox discovered...
Crimean's brain, rather overwhelmed by the events of the past days, finally kicked into gear.
Don't you fuckers think I forgot about the syphilis?
"What syphilis?" said Tom.
I was diagnosed with syphilis during my first week in the clink. That's prison talk for prison.
"So?"
I'd been fucking your wife over there non-stop right before.
"But that has nothing to do with this."
I never told you about it, and now you're going to give it to Bill. I'll kill you both if that's what it takes. We got treated for it 24 years ago. How stupid are you? Oh,
said Crimean. A middle-aged Native American man with frosted tips and a beer belly picked a discarded cabbage off the street. "Yes!" he screamed with delight and took a big bite. He did not stop to chew, and the enormous lump visibly widened his throat, getting caught halfway down. Crimean rushed behind him, enveloped him, and thrusted beneath his sternum. Alsace reached into his mouth and dug around. Eventually, her hand popped out, holding a slimy white rod. She pocketed it for later use. "Thanks a bundle," said the Native American. "I could have sworn those cabbages were boneless." He held out his hand. "Randy Chinaman, nice to meet you." Tom, Alsace, and Crimean introduced themselves each in turn. Randy, a fabulously ebullient fellow, coaxed their stories out of them. "You killed my clients," said Randy. The Fish Boys had inhabited his inn and low-quality retirement home for the past 15 years. "Thank you. I never had the balls to do it, at least not after the circumcision accident. But I couldn't take one more day with the tuna-loving freaks." He offered them the contents of his wallet. Crimean and Tom moved to grab it, but Alsace waved them off.
Really, it was our pleasure. No thanks necessary.
"At least let me teleport you into the Fairfax cryobank, so you can get to Belichick before he's removed. My proximity to the cabbage plant and propensity for invention allowed me to make giant leaps in time travel technology."
They all nodded. This was pretty convenient. Fairfax, Massachusetts, was a ghost town. 2 buildings were within its limits, each a square mile block, 20 stories high, thousands of bodies entombed within their walls. A 100-story hydrogen tank loomed between them. Tom, Alsace, and Crimean puffed back into existence in Building 2, Wing 11, Room 56. Fluorescent tubes snaked their way between burnished steel dials on the walls. An obsidian black container sat against the far wall. It was human-shaped, but stopped at the elbow. Long, clear tubes exposed freckled forearms floating in the hydrogen cocktail. They crowded around the tubes, staring at the fingers of a champion. Crimean teared up. The hot drops rolled down his cheeks and landed on his right bicep. Tears graced the face of Belichick emblazoned there, as if touched by the glorious reunion with himself.
I'd jaywalk 1,000 more times and spend another 25,000 years in the clink, which means prison, for this moment.
"And how?" agreed Tom. Alsace said nothing. She wanted to absorb this moment fully, before she absorbed Bill's penile discharge fully. Satisfied, she hit the 3-foot diameter red button in the chamber's center. Fluid drained from the tank. Very slowly, Tom and Alsace sat, backs against the wall, and played a game of wizard's chess on the implants. Crimean jumped and grabbed a pipe on the ceiling. He hung upside down and napped like a bat. Half an hour later, Tom checkmated Alsace with a cheeky move of his knight to e5. The coffin let out a ding, not dissimilar to that of a toaster oven, and a short, pudgy man popped out. Crimean dropped from the ceiling onto his knees. He bowed before Belichick.
I am not worthy, my lord, but would be proud to receive your seed.
Tom and Alsace, with a better view, took several steps back. This was not Bill, but Stephen Belichick, a mere outside linebackers coach, and from the diluted, impure line of Belichick's traitorous ex-wife, the infamous Debbie Clark. Not to mention, he spelled his name with a PH like an idiot. Tom leapt over Crimean's prostrate form and took Stephen down in a flying tackle. They crashed onto the floor and a scuffle ensued. Tom emerged the champion, locking Stephen in a tight hold from behind. Alsace pulled the cabbage bone from her pocket and held its sharp edge to Stephen's neck.
Where's Daddy, asshole?
Fuck you! Stephen spit in her face and grimaced. Crimean noticed the unchivalrous behavior and strove to correct it. He started tickling Stephen with unmerciful intensity. His fingers strummed Stephen's ribs faster than a mariachi on cocaine. Stephen laughed and cried in between. "Please!" he gasped. "I can't breathe! I can't breathe! Stop! I'll pee on him!" Tom felt a trickle of warmth on his leg. Stephen was not a liar. "Fine! I'll tell you." Stephen finally broke. Crimean gave one final rub and removed his fingers.
Well?
Alsace asked, bones still pressed against his chin. "JK," said Stephen. "My father is safe, and that's all you need to know." He bit down hard. They could hear a grinding from his teeth. His mouth filled with a pink foam. Tom felt for a pulse. "He's dead. Cyanide tooth. We saw this shit in the lion-taming game all the time. Tragic, really." Tom, Alsace, and Crimean lay down, suddenly exhausted again. They fell into a deep sleep, using Stephen Belichick's bloated corpse as a pillow. Several hours later, the door creaked open. They stirred. A shadowy figure entered the room, clothed only in a lambskin condom. "Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey," said a monotone voice. Its owner stepped into the light. Bill Mother Flippin' Belichick. They all bowed this time. Bill took in the scene. 3 incredibly attractive people worshipping him in a cryogenic freezer on top of his son's corpse. He smirked. This was the perfect way to wake up from a long nap. "I was going to make sweet, sweet love to my son," said Bill, "but I suppose you'll do just as well." Tom, Alsace, and Crimean removed their clothes. Everything was hard and wet. Everything. Tom and Crimean ejaculated prematurely.
Oh, it's so adolescent.
So Alsace got the first shot at the coach. As he inserted his tip, the condom turned red and beeped furiously. Bill hurriedly withdrew. "Sorry, lady, but you're pregnant. I don't mess around with babies. Not since autumn of '76. See you around." Bill strolled out of the room. Tom and Crimean looked at each other, wondering if they should rejoice at the prospect of fatherhood or beg for an abortion. Alsace smiled to herself, hummed the NFL theme song, and pulled out her clippers.
NFL, NFL, great for your brain. NFL, 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 all our players respect women. NFL.
She experienced the tip of God himself. Blood poured from her toenails. She hadn't clipped in days, and grossly overcompensated. The stainless steel tiles allowed the crimson fluid to build up on their surface. The dribs and drabs made a polka-dotted mosaic. A liveried attendant entered the room. He handed them each a small sheet of embroidered silk. $7 million appeared on each in silver fabric, surrounded by a golden ring of flowers. A Patriots logo interrupted the ring at the top, resplendent in red, white, and blue. He spoke with a refined British accent.
Good day to you, sirs and madam. As you have liquidated Mr. Stephen C. Belichick and enjoyed a brief sexual congress with his father, I presume you will be covering their expenses. What? Please take your receipt down to the front desk. We accept all major credit cards, organs, or cashier's checks.
They made their way downstairs and attempted to exit. A burly woman with thighs like kegs and arms like boa constrictors blocked their path.
Sorry, but I cannot allow you to leave.
She gestured to the embroidered silks.
I'm afraid you must pay the chill bill.
They beat the Jets and became contenders, and we cheered them on. Then they beat those Miami pretenders, and the jinx was gone. Still on the downers around them, said, can we go that far? Just let us stay for the record. There's no stopping this rising star. New England, the Patriots and me. New England, the Patriots and me. Rolling on to victory.
Chill Bill, written by, produced by, and starring Pat Walsh. Narrated by Pat Walsh. Sound engineering by Pat Walsh. Muse, William Bill Belichick. A special thanks goes out to Professor Bill Cobb for letting me write literally anything I wanted in his class. To Dad and Sean, always faithful beta readers. Also to Brandon Swalbenist, my first beta listener. I'm the alpha, obviously. To Mark Gerard for his excellent instrumental backing on the hot, hip, happening rap track. And to Jeff Lawton, who always helps me out with my writer's block.
The biggest news in the whole country. We'll hang the band from the Liberty Tree.
Thanks for the oranges, Mayor Bradley.
They're the champs of the AFC. We'll beat the best of the NFC. The Bruins are the only bear for me. Here's the beat for victory. Hog Hannah lead 'em in from the three. We'll beat the band 100-3. We march proud with Coach Ray Berry. Thanks for football in January. Negotiate a victory. key is ID.
New England, the Patriots and we.
The Bringle Bee, the Defrost D.
New England, the Patriots and we.
We'll run through the wind for a big easy.
New England, the Patriots and we.
We'll bury the Bears. Just wait and see.
New England, the Patriots and we. 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 New England, the Patriots and we.
That's all there is. No surprise. Go home. It's in a fucking Marvel movie. Asswipe. If I had $1 for how stupid you are, I would literally have $1. God, you're such a dillweed. I'm not Marvel, okay? I never will be. So just stop.